Let's get at her. It is a special edition of the Manely Broncos podcast. It's been 9 years, 9 stinking years, and we will be talking about it all. But the Denver Broncos have punched their ticket into the postseason. The drought is over. Actually, there are, I think it's safe to say after the season, it seems like there are 2 droughts that is over. One, of course, is the Broncos heading into the playoffs, and it certainly seems like they have also found their franchise quarterback. So it's exciting. We have a phenomenal show lined up, obviously. We are going to try and get a lot of guests lined up. Feel free to chime in the comments, of course, and we'll definitely be getting the comments on the air as much as possible. And make sure you guys, first and foremost, hit that subscribe button over there on MHRT Network. Follow the Manely Broncos Twitter account at Manely Broncos, Brandon at Brandon Miller PO, myself at Cameron Parker PO. Also, we are doing super chats now, so if you feel compelled to give a certain amount in terms of in those super chats, please feel free to do so in the comments. But let's get these comments and just overall flowing. It's going to be an exciting show. Brandon, as I said, the drought is over. The Denver Broncos shellacked, actually just dominated the Kansas City JV team the way it should have been, which was making them look like a JV football team, earning their first playoff berth since 2015. And Brandon, how are you doing? How was it in your world as you were watching it?
Dude, it is absolutely ridiculous to think about the fact that we are now a 10-win team that is, 1 blocked field goal away from sweeping the Chiefs, and going back to the playoffs for the first time in like 87 years.
That's what it feels like.
Is what it feels like. But no, I mean, that's kind of the game. Honestly, like, I know it's against the Chiefs backups, and I expected us to win that game, but that's the kind of game that you play, and that's the sort of, I was going to say, belt to ass game and score that you see from a playoff team that is playing against backups. Like, yes, the Chiefs sat most of their players. Who cares? We almost beat all of their starters in their own stadium earlier in the year. But that's what you do against backups when you are a playoff team. So yes, us winning did send us to the playoffs, but like, our performance in this game is the performance of a playoff team playing in that situation. So really just proved on all fronts that we belong in the 7th seed. And yes, we have to go up against the Bills, but they're scary. Honestly, though, I would rather play the Bills than the Ravens right now. And the Ravens are would have been who we would have had to play if we were the 6th seed. The last time we went to Buffalo last year, we beat them. And we had a worse quarterback. So I am super hyped. We get to watch later January Broncos football. I just can't believe it.
It's an exciting time, man. And I think that, definitely we lost 3 of the last 4. We lost 3 of the last 4, but we won the one that mattered. And I'll tell you what, we doubled. I'm going to say it for all the people at the back, Brandon. We doubled the win total of those stupid, dumb bettors that said we were going to win 5 wins. We doubled it, baby. We hit the ceiling. We hit the ceiling. We hit the ceiling of this 2024 Denver Broncos team. We did it with what seems to be a franchise quarterback who hit 34 total touchdowns on the season. And he also, in the process, it was the JB team, but you know what? When you combine both games together between the game that he had in Arrowhead and this game that he had at Mile High in those beautiful throwback uniforms. He threw for 80% completion percentage, 530 or so yards, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I mean, it is oh so sweet to be a Denver Broncos fan. And yes, Gonzo, we did it. We did it. We made the playoffs, Brandon. We made the playoffs.
It was a hell of a game from Bo. And yeah, I mean, even though again we talked about them being like having to play against the Chiefs backups because they sat most of their starters. Really, what you want to see out of any Broncos quarterback that has the potential to take that coveted mantle of this is our franchise guy. What you want to see from them in this division currently is like, can you play against the Chiefs? And really, in both games that we had this season, obviously we only won one of them on a blocked field goal. But we played the Chiefs hard, and we had a legitimate shot to win at Arrowhead in our first matchup. And that's really all that you can ask for. Like, even if we played both games hard and somehow lost today, which I would have been very annoyed, but I also would have been fairly shocked playing against, again, the backups of the Chiefs. But still, I would still have counted that as a win because, again, what do you want to see out of your quarterback in this division and for this team is you want to see them play the kingpins, linchpins of the division well, and that would be the Chiefs, which we did. And then honestly, the next step for me is going to be the Chargers. The Chargers were, I'm going to be honest, I think a better team than the Chiefs this year. So that's still something that I think I'm interested to see. But he passed that test of like, can you actually have the ability to go toe-to-toe with Mahomes because you're going to play him twice a year for the next decade. And Bo, in his rookie year, proved that. I have seen the receipts, specifically Jarrett Bailey. Enjoy your GMFB tattoo on your body that you suddenly decided, oh, wait, no, I'm going to try to find a way to back out of this at the beginning of December because you saw that it was like actually a possibility. That's some weak sauce, man.
Come on, bro. Let's just kind of, so one of the biggest things, and hopefully we can be able to get some people in that are guests. I've reached out to a few people, and obviously there's people on the network that can be joining at any point too. Remember to hit that subscribe button over there for MHRT Network. Let's just kind of take us a step back though, Brandon, and just really just, I will say there was a moment where you go into this game and you're thinking, you know what? The Denver Broncos are going up against a team they should win in terms of like what everything is, right? And over the last 8 to 9 years, it's really unfortunate that that's where your mind goes in the sense that, well, here's a game against the Kansas City Chiefs JV team. You really should win this game. And too often in those 8 to 9 years, it never happened. Or it happened where you would lose a game where, frankly, you shouldn't. And too often over the course of the time, and we've had this conversation on the show before, too often, we've had these kind of conversations like, man, the Denver Broncos, they lost that game and they shouldn't have. You know what I mean? But they did it in shutout fashion. So we briefly touched
Get some
on
water, man.
Yeah. We briefly touched the Broncos offense for just a little bit. But man, what you and I talked about on the show, and with Matty, of course, as well, who we'll see if he can be able to hop on here. But rightful kudos to where it needs to be, and that is this Broncos defense, Brandon. This Broncos defense, obviously, yes, it is the JV team, but they actually shut out the Kansas City Chiefs. And obviously there was the really big game last year when they were up the schneid, in terms of the streak, right, Brandon? But boy, where does this Kansas City Chiefs victory that the Broncos had weigh for you, given all the circumstances?
I mean, it's there's always going to be like, I'm not going to say there's an asterisk next to it because of the nature of them playing mostly their backups for the entire game. I actually don't know if they had a single starter have any meaningful snaps at all. So really their entire backups for the entire game. Like, yes, that's going to have a asterisk, I guess. You could just say asterisk is the only way I can think of to describe that on this fact. But that was the largest win in the series history between obviously the Broncos and the Chiefs in that storied rivalry throughout the ages, if you will. This has been the biggest, like, obviously victory by the Broncos, but also like the most, I guess, the largest blowout, if you will, between these two teams ever. And I just honestly, I'm kind of hoping and wishing it was against Patrick Mahomes and the rest of the starters, because I think we could have maybe done it in Denver. Like, they were like not playing well at Arrowhead. They've not been really playing well all year, and we don't obviously have the ability to dictate who we play or like what players that team decides to
we play
start. We play who's on the schedule. But yeah, I mean, this was to me, it was a nice taste of what's to come. But I just relish the next time we get to watch these teams play again, even though it's probably going to be next year. I mean, who knows? You never know, but probably next year. And this team is going to be improved. Like, this is probably the worst team you're going to see Bo Nix and Sean Payton have together. And this is something that I know I'm echoing what Colin Cowherd has said kind of all season, but I do believe it's true. In the sense that, like, again, you kind of like, you have Courtland Sutton, who's sort of the wide receiver 1. You don't really have a bona fide wide receiver 2, although Marvin Mims is continuing to make some kind of a case for that role for himself. But you are going to see at least one additional weapon on offense, whether that's a tight end, whether that's a running back, whether that's a wide receiver, probably more. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we add to all of those rooms this offseason in some way, shape, or form. And it's just going to be a better team next year. And Bo's going to have a year under him. And I'm just excited to see what we can do against this team again. Like, that's really what this feels like to me. And I'm super excited that we were able to get the win, super excited that we are able to go back to the postseason. And I love that. But this just kind of gave me a little bit of made me hungry to see them play again with all the chips on the table, if you will, because I think it's doable. And that's, if you can ask for, again, if you're going to ask for one thing from your heir apparent to Peyton Manning quarterback, like, that's what they need to prove. And I think we'll be there.
Yeah. To should I say, quote Patrick Chiodo, 9 years, 6 different coaches, 14 different starting quarterbacks, 7 losing seasons, and the Denver Broncos are back in the playoffs. And I think of, where the Denver Broncos currently sit, and I've got to think, just when you look at this team and everything that Sean Payton has basically said since day one, and which is he loves being the underdog, right? He absolutely loves being the underdog. I have to think, somewhat subtly to a degree, you never want things to unfold the way that they do, Brandon, but I've got to think that, with the way that this team has played in terms of being the underdog, they have clearly, you can clearly look at it from the standpoint of, this is a young team. He clearly loves being the underdog. And, it is just super exciting to see how this young team was able to fight and truly put forth. Obviously that was the JV team, but that was their most complete performance all season long. I mean, it was the Falcons game, but you got to call it for what it is. And, shutting out the Kansas City Chiefs, they shut out the Kansas City Chiefs, and that was their most complete performance of the entire season. And they saved the best for last, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, to me, the biggest, I guess, takeaway from that game and the past two games in general. Hey, Fernando, what's up? Thank you so much. Really was the play of Marvin Mims to me. Like Marvin Mims, I talked about it a little bit earlier. We talked about it last week. We've talked about it for a few weeks now, even. Like, is he a wide receiver 2? I don't know. I didn't know the answer to that question last week. And I still don't know if I'd say I know the answer to that question this week, but I do think you're seeing a bit more of an emergence there than we might have anticipated. And that is just amazing to see, because this team has needed a threat like Marvin for years and years, and we haven't really had one. We wondered if Troy Franklin could be that. Obviously, he's a rookie. He's kind of struggled. But if the Marvin Mims path is the path that Troy Franklin is going down, like, I'm all for that. I do think Marvin is an amazing weapon that we should continue to use in this offense, and I think he's only going to be just something else that the Bills are going to have to try to prepare for next weekend. But I also think that that's going to set us up for success next year. But it was just great to see him continue to make plays and make an impact on this offense in a huge way.
When you look at this, just overall with this football team and the transition from this last year with Russell Wilson, to now, given, everything that we've seen, which is an 8-win team, an 8-9 win team, to a 10-7 team, which you and I were basically in agreement on the floor and ceiling of this team, but to actually see them hit the ceiling of the first year of the rookie quarterback. But when you look at it, and people that are in the comments, please feel free to chime in and, as well. But what was like the thing that just really clicked for you at this point in the year, where they really might actually be a playoff team this year?
Well, obviously we'll talk about Bo Nix and the progress that he's shown, I guess is the best way to describe that. But to me, the biggest thing was really the play of both Nick Bonito and Jonathan Cooper. Nothing more dangerous than a young team that's playing. Absolutely true. We're playing with house money. We had nothing to lose this year. This was the year. This was the, we're going to go all in because we can, and everyone's counting us out. We have $85 million in dead cap hit from one player, and just screw it, right? And we swung for the fences, and it worked. But what I was kind of saying before, the play of Nick Bonito and Jonathan Cooper, to me, kind of solidified that. And also, well, let me give props to Zach Allen and even John Franklin Myers as well on that defensive line. But we talked for seasons and seasons, it felt like, about how we've really been missing a pass rush. We haven't really been able to get after the quarterback. And that's obviously a absolutely gigantic part of any NFL defense, but especially if you're wanting to call yourselves a playoff caliber team. I feel like every playoff caliber team that really has in the past several years been able to be called that, like, they have some kind of consistent pass rush. Maybe they don't have the you don't have to be leading the leagues in sacks like we are this year to really say that, but you have to have some kind of just threat that you are able to get to the opposing quarterback. And we really have not had that for quite a while. I don't even remember, the last time we sniffed having two guys with double digit sacks, and we got there this year. Both Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito have Jonathan Cooper has 10.5. Nick Bonito has 13.5.
We actually got close to
we almost got 3. Yeah, because is Zach Allen at 8?
Yeah, he should be at
8.5.
8.5 or almost 9.
Let's see.
It's because of the dominant performance that he had against the Bengals.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He has
You said you talking Zach Allen?
9.5. Wait, hold on. That can't be right. Is it 9.5? Because he didn't get. Hold on. 8.5. No, it was not 9.5. It was 8.5. Yep. So we got close to that trifecta. But yeah, I mean, to me, that was the biggest thing was Nick Bonito, Jonathan Cooper absolutely showing out this year and proving that they belong in this league and they belong as our primary pass rushers. And I love that we also were able to give Jonathan Cooper that contract that he absolutely has earned. Nick Bonito, I don't know what that's going to look like, but I think he's going to make himself some good money and he deserves it. But I think we're going to have really a pass rush that we can depend upon for the next 6 years. Like that is so huge to me. Like that was to me the biggest thing we went into this season talking about, especially even like the John Franklin Myers trade of like how big that was for this team because he provides a boost at just like being able to pressure and sack the opposing team's quarterback. And he has shown that. And Nick Bonito took that absolutely monster leap forward. Jonathan Cooper, who was already, a favorite of the fan favorite of the teams when we drafted him in the 7th round, I think 6th round, late draft pick. And just his story of having that heart condition as well just makes that even more amazing to witness. But both of those guys have been killing it. And again, I still have to give a shout out to both Zach Allen and John Franklin Myers because they're both killing it as well. JFM, I think, has 5.5 sacks. Yeah. Like this team has been getting after it.
Dondrea Tillman doesn't get nearly any love, and he has like 4.5, 4.5, 5 sacks. Probably, there's a legit argument that he is like the most underrated or maybe even underappreciated player, of the entire team. And he made a tackle, in terms of the game today. Thank you again, Fernando, for the $5 super chat. This almost said bull season. But I just think that when you look at this season, and this is something that you and I talked about, Brandon, just overall, like to put into perspective, this has been such a successful year for this team. But then you add the playoffs on top of this, where now you are afforded the extra practices, right? The extra practices that nobody except for, 6 other AFC teams are going to be given that opportunity. So that is just the extra growth for you. And, it's something, and we'll talk about, the Buffalo Bills and, preview this upcoming Wednesday in terms of when we do the show on Wednesday. But, that this team basically is going to be, I don't want to say forgotten about, you know what I mean? But they will be, all the pressure going into this game is going to be on the Buffalo Bills. Which, if you are a young team, and Jeff Bryant did mention that, to where it's like they are such a young team where that is such a dangerous mentality going in where, all right, everybody's doubting us. Let's go prove them wrong, if you will, or not doubting us, but just everybody's forgetting about us. Let's go prove them wrong.
What was your moment? Like, what was your moment you saw this year that basically put up in flashing lights playoffs? Like, this is a playoff team.
You kind of take it for, what it's been, if you will. And obviously the division itself has not been as dominant. But I feel like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, there were a few games, but like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game, and then going from the Buccaneers game to the Jets game, right? I think it was right, going from the Bucs to the Jets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the monsoon,
and then the monsoon, and the fact that they really would never have won that game. They never really would have won that game. And then, they go out and just demolish Atlanta, who it was pretty clear that, those are your two division leaders. And then I think the cherry on top of all of it was that Kansas City Chiefs game, win or lose, like the Kansas City Chiefs game in Arrowhead. The fact that they were primed to actually win that game, in a game where that was Bo Nix's and the offenses, if you will, but Nix's first game in Arrowhead, and you basically outplay, the future Hall of Famer. So there were a few things off to the side, but I think if I was to probably just focus solely on one area, it was probably that Chiefs game.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it before, like that. They played them hard, and they should have won that game. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. But we did it. I mean, if for anything, the moment that really solidified it for me was when Bo Nix gave that Raiders player the crazy eyes. That was I was like, damn, this guy is a psychopath. This guy's going to do whatever it takes to get to the postseason.
Yeah. Well, and we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but the defense did have, under Vance Joseph, did have a really, really good game plan against the Buffalo Bills, a rather healthy Buffalo Bills team in Buffalo, and snuck away with a game-winning, and snuck away with a game-winning field goal. But take also for Brandon, for you, Brandon, like kind of take us through your emotions too, like in terms of the overall 8 years, everything that, 8 to 9 years for you, like, because obviously you and I were kind of like introduced like a couple of years ago. So obviously we were looking at it from this year near the end of it, right? We're nearing the end, and the fact about the playoff drought being over, but kind of take us through for my sake and anybody that's in the comments about like all your emotions now that the drought is over.
Well, so okay, we won the Super Bowl when I was in college, and I was like, let me back it up even further than that. So I think I have explained this a few times when we've sort of had discussions about like how did you become a Broncos fan, and I talked about that I was not even a football fan for a while because really I kind of had a poor experience, to be honest. Like my dad is a Chiefs fan, and it doesn't even have anything to do with like division rivalry because I didn't even really care or know about that at that point. But basically he would watch like the game. He'd make me watch the game. He wouldn't explain what I was watching. Like I wouldn't really be able to get into it. He would kind of just like yell at the TV. I'm like, what's going on? And he was just like kind of in a bad mood. And I was younger, so I didn't really follow what was happening. And I was like, oh, this is stupid. So I got into basketball instead. And that's kind of been like that pretty much through kind of high school a little bit. Now towards the end of high school, I did like start to get more into it. And it was mostly when Peyton Manning came to town. And that's primarily because, which I was in high school, but that's primarily because my mom's side of the family are Broncos fans, but they're from Indianapolis. So they were really Colts fans that moved to Denver. And then when Peyton Manning came over, like it sort of, they just like kind of doubled down and they were like, oh, this is super awesome. They were still Broncos fans before that. And they were Tebow fans, massive Tebow Mania fans, but that's when I kind of started to get more into it. And like, I was still sort of like, I would say that I was a Broncos fan whenever it came up because like that was the only team I kind of cared about, but I wasn't really into it. I wasn't like a diehard. I wasn't really watching it. But then Peyton Manning came to town. It kind of got more interesting because I was like, oh, what's going to happen now? And I sort of started to get more into it. And again, it was in college that we ended up actually going to both Super Bowls, but we shall not talk about Super Bowl 48. Super Bowl 50, when that happened, when we won, was when I was in college, and then graduated college. And then pretty much since I became an official adult, we've been absolutely horrible. And I, at that point, had become like more of what I would say a diehard fan is. And I pretty much picked the worst time possible because obviously we had the Brock Osweiler years, and I really didn't know anything about anything. And I was like, oh, Brock Osweiler is good. Like, he'll be okay replacement for Peyton Manning. And then he took the money and went to Cleveland. And then we were like, okay, well, who is Trevor Siemian? Like, what's this guy going to do? And then when we drafted Paxton Lynch, I was like super hyped, right? Complete naive
the naive Broncos
moment here. Like, I will say I was really on Paxton Lynch. I didn't know anything about anything really at that point. But I was like hyped up. I was like, oh, well, we drafted a first round quarterback. This is going to be our guy. We're not going to talk about what happened from there, but he just completely flamed out. Case Keenum came to town, and I had seen what he did for the Vikings, and I was like, oh, this is the guy. He's going to get us back to the playoffs. That didn't happen. Joe Flacco comes in and just completely is atrocious, and then he goes to, ironically, the Colts, and then he looks good again, but whatever. We draft Drew Lock. I was super into Drew Lock, and I was like, oh no, Drew Lock is the guy. And it just, like, every single time I would get my hopes up and we would crash. I'd get my hopes up, we would crash. I'd get my hopes up, we would crash. And it was just like pain. I really was like not even able to enjoy watching this team as an adult. And now we get to this year with Bo Nix having the second most passing touchdowns by a rookie, only to Justin Herbert, fellow Oregon product, Oregon QB factory. And we're back in the playoffs, and it's just like a roller coaster of emotions. It was like super high. Peyton Manning comes to town. I get super, like, I get more into it and start to kind of hate the Chiefs as well. So it was sort of went the opposite direction of what my dad intended, which was like, oh, I'm going to like get you to be a Chiefs fan. That didn't happen. And just super high, absolutely came crashing down, and then kept going up, and then crashed down, and then went up and crashed down with every quarterback we signed, because I was like, oh, this is going to be the dude. And yeah, none of them were the dude. And now we get to see a rookie come in, and this is what I always wanted. Like, I got tired of signing a free agent, making a trade, because it's like those almost never work. And ironically, even though we are the team that proved 2 different times with multiple Super Bowls that can work, it's the exception, not the rule. And we finally have a young guy that we drafted, that we believe in, that we can build around. Bo Leavin, and we're going back.
We are going back to the playoffs. And, again, and say it for what it was, but 89% completion percentage. 89% completion percentage. I actually don't think that Jarrett Stidham, when he came in, he even threw a single pass, And so it was just, he basically, I think it stuck at 26 of 29 for 321.
Mm-hmm.
And in 4 touchdowns and no picks, with a darn near perfect passer rating of 152. 152.
I was like, that's not even possible,
right? Gosh, it's so wild. Obviously, everybody knows about, and everybody knows all about the craze, and obviously, as you alluded to, I wasn't the only one, but like the craze that I had with Paxton Lynch, the very famous tweet, funny enough, basically saying that Paxton Lynch was going to have a much better career than Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, funny enough, because he was in that same class. But, just over the course of the years, and, the Trevor Siemian years, and in that one year in particular, if you will, with 2016, and that small glimpse, right? That small shortened glimpse where he goes up against the Dallas Cowboys. Mark Schlereth and Mike Evans are, having this conversation on 104.3 The Fan about and I think it was Schlereth who said it, about like, oh, let's sign Trevor Siemian to a contract extension. And, after the Dallas Cowboys game, and boy, that kind of came down crashing hard. And then, excuse me. And then after that, Siemian has his other year, and then we roll into, 2018, 2018. And then, we basically roll into the Case Keenum, right? The Case Keenum year. And then from Case Keenum, we roll into the Joe Flacco, Brandon Allen, and the Drew Lock experience to Teddy Bridgewater.
Teddy Bridgewater underrated, man. Teddy Bridgewater was.
Kudos to Teddy Bridgewater on winning the high school state championship, and then possibly having a legit shot at winning a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just taking all W's this year.
Yeah, but just a long time coming, right? And a long time, coming for the Denver Broncos team. And I think that, moving forward and, into this game, again, obviously, as we've been prefacing, it's the JV team, but, if they're able to put together a full game like this, they will be darn near unstoppable moving forward as a football team. Collectively, when you look at their team stats, Brandon, it was actually a pretty impressive showing. 29 first downs, 15 passing first downs. That should be the norm based on what, with how this season has gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
14 rushing first downs. The one area where it has been just an absolute, just a piss poor performance all season long, right? Just a very bad performance all season long. You get 14 rushing first downs. Your rushing ended up being 158, right? So and actually it got mixed up a little bit here and there between Bo Nix's numbers, Jaleel's numbers, Audrick's numbers, Javonte's numbers, and obviously he had some pretty limited carries, if you will. But for as limited as it was, he was pretty solid in the game. So and then of course, there was the time where, Bo was smartly able to hit the check down, or I should say maybe not even hitting the check down, but realizing just how wide open Javonte was on some of the plays, and he was able to run free. Like it was the 3rd and 14 play, which to me looked like it was a first down. They ended up converting the 4th down. But I mean, it was truly an impressive performance, I feel like, from that running game. And, it might go unnoticed. It may, hopefully it could be able to translate, against the week against Buffalo, Brandon. But boy, let's appreciate this running game for what that was tonight.
Yeah, it was definitely a far cry from what we really felt like we had seen for the entire season. And I mean, yeah, I'm not really going to pin much of a hat on it, just because like you look at the numbers and it really it wasn't actually that impressive, because really the only person that averaged more than 6 yards per carry at all was Bo, and Javonte kind of did, but he didn't really get the ball that much. I just felt like they were actually able to move it, even though, like, again, the numbers sort of say otherwise. It just felt like they were able to at least sort of rely on the run game a little bit, and they weren't having to constantly pass it, and then weren't having to constantly rely on like just throwing screens to get any kind of like a faux rushing game, even though they did kind of still do a little bit of those, and obviously Marvin Mims was the beneficiary of that. But I do think that I just wonder what this offense can look like, and I still wonder this: if you honestly just give us any other running back, give us any of the top 8 running backs from this next draft class, and I think it's going to be even more apparent that unfortunately Javonte just kind of doesn't have it anymore. But I mean, it was nice to see that and feel that it was kind of like able to work a little bit. And I mean, a lot of that also kind of had to do with Bo being a obviously a great athlete and a great runner, and he's once again the leading rusher on the team in this game, which, I mean, unless you have Jaden Daniels or Lamar Jackson, you don't really want that, but it still was something that was nice to see because it felt like there was more, I guess, depth to the offense than what we had seen before. But I do still think that that's going to be obviously a big focus of this team in the offseason.
So we'll talk about it a little bit more during the offseason. Anybody that in the chat, feel free to chime in the comments. It's been such a weird year, for this team because it's been such a. I feel like the number one team need for this team has kind of fluctuated, right? And you and I have been talking about it, like, oh, the Broncos need a wide receiver one. Well, here comes the emergence of Cortland Sutton. Maybe they don't actually need a wide receiver one, Then you get to see, as the year is kind of winding down, some slight emergence a little bit from Nate Atkins, Adam Troutman, where maybe we actually want to maybe start seeing a little bit more Nate Atkins moving forward, which I would be perfectly fine with. His versatility, I think, is, at least on my part, not going unnoticed. You know what I mean? Like, because I think that I'm not saying he's going to be like a Kyle Juszczyk, but I think that you could certainly use him in some of those same situations. Adam Troutman, obviously, he's not a ceiling for a tight end one. But it was clearly enough for Bo to, trust them in certain moments. But, I will say probably the one consistent theme, and, the running game was certainly better today, but I think the one consistent has been the biggest need of running back one. You know what I mean? Like running back one, and then probably the argument of tight end, right? Of tight end one. So could you argue that maybe running back one is actually a far greater need than actually having a wide receiver one or a tight end one? It's a very interesting conversation.
I think all three of them are needs. Like, I don't even know if I feel comfortable ranking one of them.
I'm not saying that they aren't needs, but I'm just saying that we're going to label the number one need.
I would say the number one need to me is offensive weapons. Like, it doesn't even have to be pick any of those positions. I would be happy with it. And like, I don't really know if I would say one of them over another. Just offensive weapons to me is the number one need. And that could be running back, that could be tight end, that could be wide receiver, that could be all three of them. I just think all three of them are going to have like an equally meaningful impact. If I had to choose one, I would maybe say running back, just because of the three, that seems to be, well, maybe not. But I was going to say, of the three, that kind of has historically been the position where you can kind of get the most out of a running back in their like rookie season. Like, tight ends historically take a lot of time to develop. Wide receivers have sort of been that way, but wide receivers have kind of come a long way in that realm of, like, you do see a lot of great rookie wide receivers now. Like, even Brian Thomas Jr. on a not so great Jaguars team had an absolutely amazing year. So I still think running back has been like the most consistent of like you being able to get great production out of a rookie. But I do think wide receiver is kind of getting up there. And I mean, honestly, even with Brock Bowers and Sam Laporta the last 2 seasons in a row, tight end as well has kind of been improving there too. Although I do think that's still going to be a bit more of a learning curve, and it depends too on like how they want to use the tight end as like a blocker, and they have to learn really 2 different positions almost. But honestly, yeah, I'm just going to say I think offensive weapon to me is the number one, and it could be any of those 3 positions, and I'd be happy about it. Yeah, it's it's fun to think about because and I actually think that and this is one of the nice little transitions in terms of talking about Bo Nix's season. And, if you're even looking at it from the vantage point of, the game against the Kansas City Chiefs, and obviously, and, probably going to be saying it probably until the dogs come home because it needs to continually be said, I guess. But,
he did play, against, some of the second and third teamers of Kansas City. But all that's been said, all that has been said about Bo Nix and specifically about this offense needing weapons or, I don't want to hear the argument anymore, that, and I did see it a few times here and there where, Bo, or they've been mentioning that Caleb Williams, has far less in terms of what's around him, or, Jaden Daniels, has a lot around him. Look at all what Bo Nix has been dealing with all season. And the fact that you get a performance like that with everything that is around him, I think, frankly, needs to be studied just a little bit more, and in terms of the overall season that he's had. So when you look I think that the emergence of Marvin Mims has definitely been a revelation. But when you look at the guys that are even right after Cortland Sutton and Marvin Mims, it's a bit inconsistent. I do love the prospects of Devon Bailey. We saw a little bit of that today. Marvin Mims is another one. I think you will get there with Troy Franklin eventually, just given the fact about, with his chemistry with Bo and everything. And I think I even said it to you. It's like, I would probably feel a lot worse with Troy Franklin, if he didn't have the comfortability, so, I mean,
Sure.
It's wild for me to be, sitting here and thinking, here's the Broncos and, people thinking that, Bo's got all these great weapons when it's the furthest thing from. And Caleb and Jaden have far more superior talent, which frankly, given the season that Caleb is having, it's actually far more of a disappointment than it is a actual, impressive feat.
Yeah. I think Cortland Sutton is still quite underrated in terms of how he's viewed in the wide receiver, just at the wide receiver position group in general. And I do think, personally, I think he's a wide receiver one. But I do agree with you. I think, and I'm not even trying to take anything away from Jaden Daniels or even Caleb Williams, because I think Caleb Williams kind of showed he looked a bit better to end the year. And even the past several games, he maybe wasn't what the Bears were envisioning when they were drafting him, and specifically Bears fans as well, what they were kind of expecting. But I do think he has kind of turned it around a little bit. And the only reason I bring that up is I think we're going to look back at this year of quarterbacks drafted in 2024 and kind of really view this as like one of those special classes, because
the 1983 class.
I don't know if I'd go that far yet, just because multiple Hall of Famers, but potentially, yeah. I mean, like we talked about when the draft happened, like 6 quarterbacks going the first 12 picks was a record at that time. And I don't remember seeing this many quarterbacks from the same class have such good rookie seasons. And I think even like Sam Darnold was having an amazing career year in Minnesota. And I think if JJ McCarthy, I'm not saying JJ McCarthy would have been doing what Sam Darnold is doing, although right now he's kind of struggling a little bit more against the Lions. But I do think JJ, from what he showed, at least early on, and yes, it was preseason, like he looked pretty comfortable as well. So I think this is going to be looked at as a pretty special class when you look back at the 2024 rookies. But yeah, I do think of the rookies that were picked, I think Drake May had it worse, to be honest, in terms of like
Mayo, by the way, for breaking
their entire team was fired, coaching staff wise, I believe, after beating the Bills, which was funny. Backups, obviously, but yeah, Gerard Mira was fired. I do think, Drake May had it worse just because that entire team is kind of a dumpster fire right now, and they have almost nothing except for him. But I do think, you look at the Commanders, Austin Eckler, Brian Robinson Jr., at least for most of the season, have looked like pretty competent running backs, where that's really again an area that we have struggled in. Terry McLaurin just had a reinvention of himself, and he's always been an amazing wide receiver, but just like he's never had a quarterback, and I'm good for him because he finally does, and he is just a star. I think he's better than Courtland Sutton. So I do think, Jaden Daniels has a bit more to work with there. Zach Ertz as well seems to have formed like a pretty nice connection with Jaden, and even though he's like 34 years old, he's still playing pretty good ball. And so, yeah, I would say that, between the top guys that have been performing this year in terms of like where they were drafted top guys, with Caleb Williams and kind of the weapons that he's had, he's kind of been okay, but maybe not what you expected. And he has some pretty nice weapons, especially some that they drafted for him even this year. Jaden Daniels has some nice pieces around him. Drake May just has absolutely nothing. And Bo has, I wouldn't say nothing, but I would say he probably has maybe less than you would like to give a rookie quarterback coming in. So good for him for coming even within, 2 touchdown passes shy of tying Justin Herbert's. I mean, Justin Herbert still has the most for a rookie with 31. But I mean, if Bo connects on that 19th consecutive completion, which would have been kind of insane, he would have just continued to put his name in the record books in terms of most straight completions, I think, in Broncos franchise history, not even just by a rookie. So, he's doing well for himself.
Might actually end up, finding himself in the Pro Bowl as well. Who was voted as the
fourth alternate, I think.
Well, I was going to say he was voted a better quarterback according to the Pro Bowl than Patrick Mahomes. So, I mean, if we're going to be
if that's what the Pro Bowl is used for, but I do think Patrick Mahomes has not had a great year.
Well, I was just going to say, if we're spewing narratives about Bo Nix having a better year than Pat Mahomes, it's good to see that the fan voting actually rightfully got one. I think that there's actually a chance where the Broncos might actually end up with more. So the people that we didn't get a chance to talk about the Pro Bowls, but Nick Bonito got in as a starter. Pat Surtain got in, and Marvin Mims, I believe, got in as a special teamer. Quinn Miners obviously was a snub. Zach Allen was a snub. They both can still get in, obviously. And then of course, you have Bo Nix, as we just mentioned, as the fourth alternate. But Courtland Sutton probably as well. And speaking of Courtland Sutton, congratulations to him on hitting his bonus.
Mm-hmm. And he hitting 1,000 yards too.
He hit a little bit more than the bonus, and he hit 1,000 yards for the first time since 2019, as we referenced, of like Joe Flacco, Drew Lock, the Brandon Allen experience, basically proving that he is quarterback proof until, just the unfortunate thing that was, and that's been the Broncos in the last, 8 years. But kudos to Courtland Sutton and Garrett Bowles for getting into the playoffs. And we talk about, stuff in terms of like, what it's been like in the last 8 to 9 years, or specifically 9 years, right, since they've, been here, right, Brandon? You gotta feel so happy for guys like Courtland Sutton and Garrett Bowles, and specifically too.
I'm so happy for Garrett Bowles, man.
And even this ownership group, you had Nate Hackett, along the way in 2022. Then in comes, Sean Payton, and in just a quick turnaround, they end up snapping its 9-year playoff drought.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Feels great to be back.
It's slightly a bit mad. I mean, selfishly, you wish Justin Simmons could certainly appreciate some of that. But
I do think of the guys that you talked about, I love it for Courtland Sutton as well, but Garrett Bowles has just been battling, man. And I'm just so happy that I can't forget that quote that he gave where he was like, I've been here for 7 years and all I've done is lose. You won this time.
Yep. And as Bronco Talk from VA mentions, the offensive line deserves, some praise, for this season. And I think that, when you kind of do a you look back in terms of the Russell Wilson year, the offensive line was getting praised, right, Brandon? Like the offensive line was actually getting praised because of the performance of that line, but it was getting brought down because of the play of the quarterback. And then that's when you really started to hear a little bit more comments being made about sacks being a QB stat and everything like that. So the offensive line, even under Sean Payton, has actually impressed more than regressed. And so the fact that now we have, it appears, that franchise quarterback, and then you look at arguably a top 5, not just top 10, a top 5 offensive line, very, very impressive what they've been able to do. And, and that goes to what you and I talked about, which was if you're going to kind of nitpick some of the needs of this team going forward, I wouldn't be upset if they address center. But they did a good job. They did a really good job overall on the season. So if they chose not to do it based on just continuity and going forward with this season, wouldn't be upset at that one bit, because it certainly seems like left tackle's locked up, right tackle's locked up. Everything's pretty much locked up for you.
I think this team is on the best projection, like the best upward trend since, absolutely since winning the Super Bowl, but even maybe even before then, because I feel like, being able to put together teams with free agents that competed in 2 Super Bowls in 3 years, was an absolutely amazing feat by John Elway, the general manager, when he was the general manager, because he is no longer a general manager for some people that seem to still not know that, because I still see it. I think it's just a troll job. But that is, I don't think that is a sustainable way to build a team for the future. I think it's a great way to build a win now team around a Hall of Famer. But I do think that I'd say even going back to before we won Super Bowl 50, this is the best upward trend we've seen in terms of the way the team is being built.
Mm-hmm. From the inside out, basically. Yeah. It's how things are. Yeah.
And like that's not to say you have to draft everyone. Like that's not feasible either. You can't hit on every single pick, but like I do think they're doing it the right way.
But it's interesting, when you do a bit of a comparison to Jerry Jones down there in Dallas, he did the right thing, right? He did kind of the right thing in terms of building it inside out. Unfortunately, there's just far more circumstances, taking place a little bit down there in Dallas. And you look at Denver, they're doing it the right way right now, except it certainly appears a little bit like the Broncos ownership and front office. They're not necessarily micromanaging, right? They're not micromanaging this team, and Jerry Jones certainly seems as a micromanager. Like he's meddling his way into a lot of different, situations, right? Because he wants it his way. He wants it the Jerry way. And, I think rightfully so, the Broncos are looking at this from Sean Payton's side and saying, how do you want this team constructed, right? And they're moving forward with that. And there's no smarter feat than that, than actually building the best possible talent around you and your head coach. Glenn, another co-host, if you will, I'll give him, the benefit of the doubt. Host of the 5280 podcast, along with Mundungus Creevy, and Engage Madrid, who's out there doing some content with Bronco Syndicate. He drops in and he says, for all the talk about the teams wanting to face the Bengals in the playoffs, I can't imagine anyone is looking forward to playing this defense as well as the offense, that's clicking. And I think that as we look a little bit, and again, we'll do the preview we'll do the preview a little bit here, Brandon. We'll on Wednesday's show, but you also got to factor in about how impressive this win is for the team now going into the playoffs, because that is a win offensively, defensively, that you can move forward to this very next game to Buffalo with how you played defensively, with how you played offensively, efficient offense, like actual strike offense. You know what I mean? Like, one of the plays that just it vividly is in my mind, is the Devon Vele third down conversion on 3rd and 11, which was a really impressive route and released by Vele, and Bo Nix hits him. And Bo Nix hits him and hits a pretty decent ball, for him. And so when you see that, and you see, and yeah, it was a touchdown, but for all intents and purposes, one bad play on the day, and it resulted in a touchdown play for Vele. Like, the team was just on all cylinders today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just this is the best possible momentum to carry into wildcard weekend, and this team is healthy.
Yeah, I mean, and I know the answer, Brandon, and to anybody that's in the chat, but it's like, if you were to ask me if I was to take a 21-17 victory that just we got in by the skin of our teeth, type of victory, or a 38-0 win, like a 38-0 win where you absolutely, should have beaten the Chiefs and frankly should have beaten them like a drum that you did, I will gladly take that latter.
Yeah, absolutely. So, couldn't agree more.
All right. It seems like a lot of people are busy. I thought for sure we could, get a few people in the stream. But I wanted to just, piggyback about just how impressive it is, for this Denver Broncos team. And, you look at just the overall, history of how we've gotten here, for this team, even, getting Sean Payton, right? I think it's safe to say to all the naysayers out there, how's that first round pick turning out right now, guys?
Yeah, right.
I mean, Bradley Chubb is a Miami Dolphin, and the Miami Dolphins are out of the playoffs. And so Bradley Chubb isn't going to be seeing the playoffs, but you know who is? The Denver Broncos, led by head coach Sean Payton. So how are those naysayers feeling now?
Probably pretty upset that they have to tattoo GMFB on their body.
Yeah, just a little bit. So it's impressive. When you just factor in everything that's transpired this year, the team deserved it. And I think that, you could definitely say as the season was progressing, at least some of those games, that it looked like the defense during some stretches didn't deserve it, but the offense did. But I think collectively, when you look at it as a whole and so far this season, this team really deserved the playoffs. Like they deserved to be in this spot. The Cincinnati Bengals, they started off on a pretty disgusting patch to begin the year. And unfortunately, you just got to call it for what it is. They dug themselves too big of a hole at the beginning part of that season to where they just unfortunately couldn't, make into the playoffs. Would they have been a pretty dominant playoff team or tough out? Absolutely. But they didn't. They absolutely didn't. They beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then, the Broncos ended up taking care of business against the Kansas City Chiefs, and the rest is history.
Boo-hoo, Bengals fans. I mean, yeah, would it have been cool to see Joe Burrow in the playoffs? Sure, but construct your team better. Have a defense that actually can stop anyone, and then you'll get there. And kudos to Joe Burrow, because he had an absolutely incredible year, except for me when he decided to throw a single touchdown in my fantasy playoff championships when he had not done that since October of last year, and totally made me probably lose the matchup. But other than that, he had an absolutely MVP caliber year. But yeah, I mean, it's a team sport. Like, your quarterback can only carry you so far when you have a defense that gives up almost everything except for Trey Hendrickson. Defense except for Trey Hendrickson. You're not really going to get very far. And when your offensive line can't protect your quarterback, even though they've done a decently better job, you're not going to get very far. So yeah, Crimea River, like, sucks, but
to basically
see you next year.
To say a phrase that you guys have been doing all season long, you bungled, right? Or you bangled, or is it bungled? You basically bungled the entire season away. You didn't deserve to get in. And you know who was and who got in? The team and the head coach that everybody clearly hates, and that is Sean Payton. Sean Payton's Denver Broncos got in, not the Zach Taylor Cincinnati Bengals.
Absolutely.
Let's bow. Any other final thoughts as we kind of ran again? We'll see if we can be able to get maybe some people in, but that's okay. We'll be doing another show here on Wednesday, so this is, like you said, this is a special edition, post-game edition, but just reflecting on everything that's transpired so far this year, the last 8 years, and getting to that frickin' playoff berth, man. What a game.
We're talking playoffs, baby. That's all I have to say. We'll discuss more about the Bills matchup on Wednesday, but we're talking playoffs.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you guys so much, I think I say this for obviously not just the Manely Broncos podcast, but, everybody that does, Broncos content on the MHRT network, the Orange and Blue network, anybody that has done Bronco podcasts through these 8 to 9 years. We made it, man. Like we absolutely made it. We are going to be able to be producing podcast content for a playoff football team in the Denver Broncos. Like, how sweet is that? To finally be excited that we can talk about a team that is trending in the right direction. And sure, we might regurgitate a lot of the same ideas and some of the same points and, everything, but like, just the fact that we are finally here, we made it. We are, we're getting to the point where this team under Sean Payton, it just feels so good. So let's just relish in that, and let's go make some more terrific content, on any sort of platform that you guys are, using it. So then, and that goes for everybody, on the Orange and Blue network, anybody that's on, which is partnered with the MHRT network, any of those shows, man. Like, it's exciting, Brandon. Like, it is super exciting. You and I were even talking about this with Matty at the Nuggets game. Like, you joined, was it 2021, 2022? Was it we said it was the Javonte Williams year, right?
Yeah, Javonte Williams rookie year.
I think that sounds
so
right.
That was 2021?
I think that sounds right. Yeah, 2021 or near 2022 or something like that. But like, again, like, all of us, like Matty, you, Brandon, even Marcus, when he was on mainly, like we've been kind of covered some doldrums and, some pretty bad football. And so to finally get a chance to say that we are covering some playoff football is going to be pretty exciting. Thank you again, Fernando, and thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Fernando,
for the super chat.
Thanks for everyone who hopped in and talked some playoff ball with us. And
to reiterate, what Glenn said, this team, this feels differently because the arrow is pointing up. Now where we were on the end of our windows with Elway and PFM when we won those. And, you can't wait to certainly see what happens next. And it's exciting. It is absolutely exciting. So I think that'll do it.
Let's bow.
Let's bow. And we will be doing another episode of Manely Broncos this upcoming Wednesday. I want to, again, thank you guys, everybody that was chiming in. The chat was just blowing up all night long. So thank you guys so much. Make sure you hit the that subscribe button over there on the MHRT Network page. We had some unfortunate thing, with Facebook, so we're no longer going to be linked with Facebook. And make sure you follow both Brandon and I on our socials. So at Cameron Parker PO, at Brandon Miller. I just shouted myself out twice. You can follow Brandon Miller PO. You can follow myself at Cameron Parker PO. Matty Mulls is not here tonight, but you guys can also follow him at Matty Mulls Pod, and everybody that is a part of this network. We do the 5280 podcast. Obviously, Glenn Hauser, pride and joy of the 5280 podcast. What's up, Biggie? You just caught us near the end of the show, but we are doing fantastic, man. We are heading to the playoffs. It's super exciting. We want to say thank you, guys. There will be a 5280 sports show on Tuesday, and as always, there's Broncos breakdown with Bronco Bill. There is the Manely Broncos podcast, obviously on Wednesday at 7:30, regularly scheduled. And then there's obviously the Wild Wild West show. So that's exciting, where you get an overall view of the Wild Wild West. And then you look at the Mile High Symposium, I think is also on Wednesday. And then, there's the Orange and every single show that's on the Orange and Blue Network, all the content that they do over there. A lot of content for you over here on the network. So again, thank you guys so much for hopping in. And as always, don't forget.
Let's go Broncos! God bless Bo Nix!
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flight miles. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my lifestyle. Wait a minute.